I walked onto the stage expecting a trophy, but when the spotlight swept the crowd, it landed on my husband and his mistress in the front row. They were laughing. Then the giant screen behind me lit up, and 300 colleagues went silent. I thought I was there to receive a bonus, but I was actually the punchline of a joke my husband had been planning for 6 months. My name is Elena, and at 6 in the morning, my life is measured in milligrams. I sat at the kitchen table in our drafty Columbus rental, splitting my mother's blood pressure medication in half because the insurance approval was still pending. My mother was in the guest room, recovering from a stroke that had stolen her words and my savings account. I had $3,000 in credit card debt and a husband who made 6 figures but somehow never had enough cash for the electric bill. I worked as an internal communications specialist for Northline Ledger Group, a logistics giant that moved everything from grain to microchips. It sounded important, but for the last 4 months, my salary had been frozen. They called it restructuring. I called it wage theft. My husband, Tyler, worked 2 floors up in sales. Tyler did not have frozen wages. Tyler was the golden boy, the guy who closed deals over scotch and steak while I ate instant oatmeal at my desk. Lately, though, the golden boy had been tarnished. He came home late, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine, and his phone spent the entire evening face down on the coffee table. Then the email pinged into my inbox. It was from Marissa, the head of HR. The subject line read, "Office Party, Mandatory Attendance." I clicked it open. There was a bold line at the bottom that made my stomach flip. Special agenda, surprise on-stage recognition for Elena. I stared at the screen. Recognition usually meant a bonus. A bonus meant I could buy my mother the good medication. I wanted to believe it. That evening, I stayed late to finish a newsletter. I noticed a weird entry on the shared Outlook calendar that someone had forgotten to mark as private. Vendor run, private storage, 2,300 hours. Curiosity, or maybe just a gut feeling, made me take the elevator down to the basement garage instead of walking out the front door. A white van was backed up to the service elevator. 2 men were unloading heavy sealed plastic crates, no shipping labels, no logos. "Hey!" the night guard barked, stepping in front of me. "Restricted area. Elena. Just event sponsors dropping off swag bags." Swag bags did not require 2 men to lift them. I nodded and turned toward my car, but I felt eyes on my back. The next day, I was by the water cooler when Caleb Ward, a guy from maintenance, stopped pushing his mop. Caleb was quiet. He saw everything but said nothing. Usually. Today was different. He looked left, then right, ensuring the hallway was empty. "Elena," he said, his voice low. "At the party tomorrow. Do not go near the stage until they call your name, and watch where you step." "What?" Why, I asked. "Just, don't go early," he muttered, pushing his bucket away before I could ask more. The night before the party, the air in our house was suffocating. Tyler walked into the bedroom holding a dress I had never seen before. It was silver, tight, and completely not my style. "Wear this tomorrow," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. "It's a bit flashy for a corporate mixer, isn't it?" I asked, touching the sequins. "You're getting recognized." "Aren't you?" Tyler smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want you to look perfect. Be there at 7 sharp. Don't draw attention to yourself until the moment is right." He went downstairs to take a call. I followed him, stopping at the top of the stairs when I heard his voice drop to a whisper. I held my breath. "Everything is set," Tyler said into the phone. "Yeah, she has no idea. I just need her to walk up." "Then it's done. The PR team is ready to spin it the second she falls." I crept back to the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't planning a celebration. He was planning an execution. I arrived at the venue at 6 in the evening, an hour before the doors were set to open. My stomach was a knot of anxiety and caffeine. Since I had ghost-written the keynote speech for the CEO, I wanted to check the teleprompter and ensure the lighting wouldn't blind me, but Marissa was guarding the stage like a pit bull in designer heels. She stepped in front of the stairs the moment I approached, her smile tight and entirely vacant of warmth. "Elena." "You are early," Marissa chirped, physically blocking my path. "Please, just sit in the waiting area. We are doing some last-minute calibration. Do not go on stage until we call your name. It needs to be a surprise." I sat in the shadows of the ballroom, watching the room fill up. The air conditioning was set to freezing, yet my palms were sweating. Then the double doors swung open, and the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. Tyler walked in. He was not looking for me. He was walking alongside Brielle, the 22-year-old marketing intern who had started 3 months ago. Brielle was glowing, dressed in a crimson gown that cost more than my car, laughing at something Tyler whispered in her ear. He had his hand on the small of her back, a gesture so familiar and intimate it made my breath hitch. As they passed under the chandelier, the light caught her wrist. I froze. She was wearing a thick gold cuff with a distinct braided pattern. I knew that weight. I knew that pattern. I had ordered that exact bracelet for our 5th anniversary 2 weeks ago. It was supposed to be a custom piece for me, a promise that we were going to try harder. Tyler had told me the jeweler lost the order. Seeing it now on the wrist of a girl who looked at my husband like he was a god was a physical blow. I turned away, trying to hide the trembling in my hands, and moved toward the refreshments. I needed water. 2 women from the accounts department were standing near the high tables, their backs to me. "It is sad, really," one of them whispered, sipping her wine. "Tyler says she has been unstable for months. He is just waiting for the right time to file the papers. I heard she is the one refusing to sign," the other replied, keeping him hostage in that marriage. The water in my cup rippled. Tyler had not just cheated, he had preemptively murdered my reputation. He had painted a picture of a crazy, clinging wife to explain away his affair before I could even discover it. Suddenly, a rough hand brushed against my elbow. I jumped. It was Caleb. He was dressed in a catering uniform today, blending into the background. He didn't look at me, but he pressed a folded square of paper into my palm. "If they call you up," Caleb mumbled, his eyes scanning the room for supervisors. "Do not stand on the X." He vanished into the kitchen before I could respond. I unfolded the note. It was a crude drawing of the stage floor. I looked up. The stage was empty now. I walked closer, squinting against the stage lights. There, right in the center of the platform, was a large cross made of thick, black gaffer tape. It looked innocent enough, a standard mark for actors, but something about the placement felt aggressive. It was too far forward, too close to the edge. I caught the eye of a tech guy adjusting a microphone stand. "Excuse me," I called out. "What is that mark for?" He looked at the tape, then at me, then quickly back at his shoes. "Just blocking for the live stream cameras. Lighting focus. Standard stuff." He was lying. I work in communications. I know when people are reciting a script. Before I could press him, a heavy hand clamped onto my shoulder. I smelled the sandalwood cologne before I heard the voice. "Elena," Tyler said. I turned. He was smiling, that dazzling salesman smile that had charmed half the logistics industry, but his eyes were dead. "You look tense. Drink some wine. Relax." He slid his hand down my arm and gripped my wrist. His fingers pressed hard against the bone, right where my pulse was racing. It wasn't a caress. It was a restraint. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice dripping with fake concern for the benefit of the colleagues watching us. "Today is big. Don't ruin it." "You are hurting me," I whispered through my teeth. He squeezed harder for a second, a sharp warning, before letting go and smoothing the fabric of his jacket. "Just go sit down. Elena, the show is about to start." I took a step back, rubbing my wrist. I looked at the stage, at the black X, at the husband who had given my jewelry to his mistress, and at the colleagues who already believed I was insane. This was not an awards ceremony. This was a public execution, and I was expected to walk politely to the guillotine. The memory hit me with the force of a physical slap. 3 months ago, while my mother was in her second surgery, Tyler had rushed into the hospital waiting room with a stack of papers. He told me the bank needed a signature for a loan modification to cover the medical bills. I was exhausted and terrified of losing my mom, so I signed where his finger pointed. I did not read the fine print about asset reallocation. I trusted him. I pulled my phone from my clutch with trembling fingers and opened our banking app. My Face ID failed. I typed in the password we had shared for 6 years. Access denied. I clicked the recovery link, and a notification popped up saying a code had been sent to a recovery email I did not recognize. It started with the letter B. It was the first letter of her name. He had not just locked me out of the account. He had handed the keys to our life to a 22-year-old intern. Caleb appeared at my elbow again, pretending to check a fire extinguisher. His voice was barely a whisper. I used to do rig security for stadium tours, Caleb said, keeping his eyes on the floor. That X mark in a normal show? It is the sweet spot for lighting. But see that black box zip-tied under the lip of the stage? That is not standard audio gear. It has a hydraulic line running to the trapdoor mechanism. It looks like a drop release. My blood ran cold. A drop release. They were literally planning to pull the floor out from under me, or perhaps trigger a mechanism to dump something on me. It was slapstick cruelty designed to look like an accident. I moved away from Caleb and slipped behind a heavy velvet curtain near the staging area. Marissa and Brielle were standing just feet away, unaware of my presence. Marissa was adjusting the strap of Brielle's dress. "Do not worry about the timing," Marissa said, her voice low and venomous. "When she walks up there, just let the system run. The video will autoplay the moment she hits the mark. If she screams or cries, it is even better. PR has the statement ready about her mental breakdown, and Tyler gets the house Brielle asked, checking her reflection in her phone. He gets everything," Marissa confirmed. "Once she is fired for cause, the morality clause in the prenup kicks in. She walks away with 0. I leaned back against the cold concrete wall. The cruelty was breathtaking. They were not just trying to end my marriage. They were orchestrating a public character assassination to strip me of my job, my reputation, and the health insurance keeping my mother alive. They needed me to look crazy so they could look like victims. I peered out from the curtain. The room was buzzing. Half the sales team had their phones in their hands, cameras open, waiting for the spectacle. They had been primed for a show. Tyler stood near the front, checking his watch, his face a mask of faux concern. I remembered something Tyler told me during his first week as a manager. He had said, "In this company, Elena, the story matters more than the meaning. If you control the narrative, you control the truth." He was right. He had written a tragedy for me, but he forgot that I was the one holding the microphone. I smoothed the fabric of my dress and wiped the sweat from my palms. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. But I was not going to be the clown. I was going to turn this stage into a courtroom, and I was the only one who had brought the evidence. And now, for a very special recognition. The MC boomed, his voice echoing off the cavernous walls of the banquet hall. "Please welcome our very own Elena." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled in the last 5 minutes, but my spine was steel. The applause was thin and scattered, like the sound of dry leaves skittering across pavement. They were not clapping for a winner. They were clapping with the morbid curiosity of drivers slowing down to look at a car wreck. I could feel the weight of 300 pairs of eyes drilling into my back. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The lights were blinding, hot white beams that erased the rest of the world. I saw the black gaffer tape X glowing under the spot in the center of the stage. Caleb's voice rang in my head like a warning bell. Do not stand on the X. It looked innocent enough to anyone else, just a mark for the camera. But to me, it looked like the trigger of a trap. I walked past it. I stopped 2 feet to the left, standing in the dimmer spill light. I saw the confused frown flicker across the lighting technician's face in the booth, but I held my ground. I was not going to stand where they wanted me to fall. Behind me, the massive LED screen roared to life. Music started playing a clownish, upbeat tune that clashed violently with the formal black tie atmosphere. It was the kind of music you play for a blooper reel. Elena is always so dedicated to her personal life, the pre-recorded narrator's voice said, but the tone was thick with sarcasm. A photo flashed up on the screen behind me, looming large enough for everyone to see. It was a grainy picture taken through a hospital window. It showed me feeding my mother soup, my hair messy, wearing sweatpants, looking exhausted and ungroomed. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. That moment was private. It was sacred. They had stolen it and turned it into a punchline. The text overlay in bright red letters read, "Always using family as an excuse to miss KPIs." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. It was not warm. It was sharp and jagged. I looked down at the front row. Tyler was there, his arm draped possessively over Brielle's shoulders. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom, his face flushed with the thrill of victory. He whispered something to Brielle, and she giggled behind her hand, her eyes shining with malice. To their left sat the CEO, the major sponsors, and a reporter from the local business journal. Tyler had gathered an audience of the most important people in our industry to witness my destruction. He wanted to make sure that when I broke, I would never be able to work in this town again. I locked eyes with Marissa, who was standing in the wings, clutching a clipboard to her chest. She was smirking, waiting for the tears, waiting for the scream. She motioned for me to just stand there and take it. Instead, I walked over to the podium and gripped the microphone. Marissa stiffened. She hesitated, then nodded at the sound guy to unmute it. She probably thought I was going to beg for mercy. She probably thought this was part of the breakdown she had scripted. "Can I just have 30 seconds?" I asked. My voice amplified through the speakers, cutting through the murmurs. "I just want to thank the company." Marissa nodded, her smile tight and predatory. "Go ahead," her eyes seemed to say. "Dig your hole deeper." I did not look at the teleprompter. I did not look at the camera. I looked straight at Tyler. I saw his smile falter, just for a fraction of a second, as he realized I was not crying. "I used to believe this company was my second family," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and cold as absolute zero. I believed that, right until the moment I realized who was selling the house from under me. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, sudden, and absolute. It was the sound of 300 people realizing that the script had just been thrown into the fire. The air in the room shifted from mockery to tension, thick enough to choke on. Tyler sat up straighter, his hand slipping from Brielle's shoulder. I had their attention now, and I was not going to let go. I raised the small plastic remote the tech team had left on the podium. It was a standard clicker, the kind used in boring quarterly reviews, but in my hand, it felt like the trigger of a loaded weapon. The room was silent, waiting for my apology, waiting for me to break down and prove them right. Tyler was staring at me with a look of smug anticipation. He expected a slide of flowers or perhaps a resignation letter. I pressed the button. The screen behind me flickered. The grainy photo of me in the hospital vanished. In its place, a stark, high-contrast file directory appeared. The folder name was large enough for the people in the back row to read NLG After Hours. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Before anyone could process the title, the video auto-played. It was security footage, stamped with a date from 3 weeks ago and the time showing 2:14 in the morning. The angle was high and wide, capturing the secluded loading dock of the private storage facility, the one that wasn't supposed to exist on the official books. On the massive screen, 2 figures walked into the frame. They were unmistakable. One was Tyler, wearing his signature trench coat. The other was Marissa, the head of HR, holding a clipboard. They were not doing HR work. They were directing 3 men in dark hoodies who were rapidly loading unlabeled, heavy crates into the back of an unmarked van. In the front row, Brielle stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup looking like a mask on a corpse. She looked from the screen to Tyler, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific realization. Tyler reacted a second later. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a feral panic. He lunged out of his seat, knocking over a glass of wine that shattered across the table. "Turn it off!" Tyler roared, scrambling toward the stage steps. "She is faking it. Give me that remote." He made it to the first step before a heavy arm barred his path. It was the head of event security, a man who had been told strictly to prevent me from causing a scene. Now, seeing an aggressive man charging a woman on stage, his training kicked in. He shoved Tyler back hard. "Sir, you need to sit down." The guard barked. Tyler stumbled back, his face twisting in rage. "You idiot, do not touch me. She is hijacking the system." I stood perfectly still on the stage, the microphone gripped tight in my hand. I looked down at my husband, who was currently being restrained by the very security team he had hired to humiliate me. "I did not plan to crash your party." "Tyler," I said, my voice booming calmly over the chaos. "I just planned to put the truth back where it belongs." "Right in the light." I pressed the button again. The video faded, and an audio waveform appeared on the screen. The speakers crackled, then played a voice recording. It was crystal clear. It was a phone conversation, one that my lawyer had already verified as admissible because it was recorded on a company line that warned all calls were monitored. "We cannot just fire her." "Marissa," Tyler's voice said from the speakers, echoing through the stunned hall. "If we fire her without cause, she keeps her shares in the medical coverage. We need a scandal. Make her look unstable. Once she is committed or fired for conduct, I get power of attorney over the accounts." "Leave it to me," Marissa's voice replied on the recording. "I will set up the stage at the party. By the time she walks off that platform, she will be unhireable." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Then, a low murmur started, growing rapidly into a roar. The sea of smartphones that had been pointed at me to capture my humiliation turned in unison. Hundreds of lenses were now focused on Tyler and Marissa. "Shut it down," Marissa shrieked from the wings, abandoning her post and sprinting toward the sound booth. "Cut the feed! Cut the power!" The lighting guy and the sound engineer were frantically hammering on their consoles, their faces pale with panic. Nothing was responding. The screens stayed live. The audio kept playing on a loop. I glanced toward the back of the room, up to the technical scaffolding. Caleb was standing there in the shadows, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were cold and satisfied. He had used a remote override, a localized transmitter he had told me about, to lock the system onto my feed for exactly 10 minutes. Tyler was shouting something at the CEO, trying to explain. But the CEO was backing away from him as if Tyler were radioactive. The trap they had built for me had snapped shut, but they were the ones standing on the X. I did not waste my breath on the affair. Infidelity is a moral failing, but embezzlement is a felony, and I knew exactly which one the board members in the front row cared about more. I pressed the remote again, skipping past the photos of Tyler and Brielle holding hands at dinner. That was personal pain. What I put on the screen next was corporate poison. What you are looking at is an email chain between human resources and the executive office, I said, my voice steady. Subject line, creating a paper trail for termination with cause. The screen displayed the email from Marissa clearly. It outlined a plan to flag my attendance record as an ethics violation, citing my time spent at the hospital as theft of company time. The goal was explicitly stated in the second paragraph. If we terminate for cause, we void the spousal support clause and the health insurance continuation. This will save the company approximately $40,000 this fiscal quarter. A collective gasp went through the room. I saw the faces of my colleagues' assistants, drivers, warehouse managers harden. They all had families. They all feared exactly this. They tried to cut off my mother's stroke medication to save a rounding error in the budget. I told them. But look at the next slide. I clicked. A spreadsheet appeared. It was a comparison chart I had built. On the left were the frozen wages of the communications and logistics staff, pending a restructuring that had dragged on for 6 months. On the right was a column labeled Event, Sponsorship, and Vendor Logistics. The numbers on the right were staggering. While our salaries were frozen, the budget for these private night events increased by 200%. I explained, this money is not going to vendors. It is being funneled into a shell account. The CEO stood up, his face purple. Cut the microphone. This is proprietary data. You are in violation of your non-disclosure agreement. Actually, sir, I replied, looking him in the eye, I am in full compliance. Every document here was accessed through my own login, backed up to the central server according to the whistleblower protocols in our employee handbook. I did not hack anything. I just read what you thought I was too stupid to notice. One of the major sponsors, a man who ran a national shipping fleet, stood up and pointed a shaking finger at the screen. Why is my company logo on that van in the video? We never authorized night shipments from this facility. What are you moving in my trucks? Tyler tried to regain control. He stepped forward, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender, sweating profusely under the stage lights. Please, everyone, settle down, Tyler pleaded, his voice cracking. She is under a lot of stress. Her mother is dying. She is confusing grief with conspiracy. She needs a doctor, not an audience. I lowered the microphone just an inch, staring at him with enough coldness to freeze the room. Don't you dare, I said, my voice dropping an octave but amplified clearly. Do not use my mother's sickness to hide your crimes. Brielle, realizing the ship was sinking, tried to distance herself. She stood up, tears streaming down her face, looking at the CEO. I did not know I thought it was just extra shifts. Tyler told me it was standard procedure. I clicked the remote one last time. A video played of Brielle sitting in Tyler's car. She was not crying. She was laughing as she opened a thick manila envelope. She pulled out a stack of cash and fanned it near her face. $5,000 for one drop. Brielle's voice on the video was gleeful. Honey, keep the wife busy. I will drive the van myself. Brielle slumped back into her chair, burying her face in her hands as the room erupted into chaos. In the back of the room, unseen by the panicked executives, Caleb pulled his phone from his pocket. He did not look excited. He looked focused. He typed a short message to a contact he had saved from his old life, a forensic accountant at the Federal Bureau. It was not a call for a raid. It was just a tip. Check the Northline ledger. Tonight. I looked out at the sea of faces, the angry sponsors, the terrified executives, and the husband who had tried to destroy me. I did not come here to ask for your pity, I said, and I dropped the remote onto the podium with a final clatter. I came to make sure you stop hunting. I thought the silence after the party was the sound of victory. I was wrong. It was the sound of the tide pulling back before a tsunami. At 3 a.m, a heavy pounding on my front door woke me from a restless sleep on the sofa. It was a sheriff's deputy. He did not smile. He handed me a thick stack of paperwork. Ma'am, you are being served with a temporary protective order, he said, his hand resting near his belt. Your husband has filed a complaint alleging domestic violence, cyberstalking, and credible threats against his life. You are to vacate the premises immediately." "He is lying," I shouted, my voice cracking. "He is the one who—" "Save it for the judge. The deputy cut me off. Grab your essentials. You have 10 minutes. I was on the street before the sun came up, shivering in my car. By 8 in the morning. My phone buzzed with an email from the Northline Legal Department. I was suspended without pay, effective immediately for the unauthorized dissemination of proprietary data and violation of corporate privacy policies. They had fired me for proving they were thieves. I drove to the pharmacy. My mother needed her blood thinners and the new stabilizing medication. The total came to $450. I handed over our joint debit card. "I am sorry," the pharmacist said, looking at the screen with a frown. "This card has been declined. It says, 'Refer to issuer for fraud suspicion.' I tried my personal credit card. Declined." Tyler had reported all our cards as compromised the moment the party ended. He had frozen me out of every single dollar we owned. I stood there, humiliated, while the line behind me grew impatient. I had to leave without the medicine. My mother had enough pills for 2 days. After that, I was looking at a stroke recurrence. I parked my car in the lot behind an old diner, trying to stop my hands from shaking. A gray sedan pulled up next to me. The window rolled down just an inch. It was Juno, a junior accountant who sat 3 desks away from me. She looked terrified. "Take this," Juno whispered, sliding a USB drive through the crack. "It is the backup ledger for the shell company. If they find out I gave this to you, I am dead." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because Tyler tried to hit on me last Christmas," she said, her voice trembling. "And because you are right." She drove off before I could say thank you. I went to the cheap motel where I had used my last $20 of cash to book a room. Caleb was waiting in the parking lot. He was not wearing his maintenance uniform. He was wearing a sharp leather jacket and looking at a tablet. "You are in deep water, Elena," Caleb said without preamble. "I know," I said, leaning against my car door. "I have no money, no lawyer, and my husband has painted me as a violent stalker." "Listen to me," Caleb said, stepping closer. "I am not just a janitor. I used to be a senior security auditor for a firm in Chicago. Northline hired me 5 years ago to test their internal controls. When I found the holes Tyler was using to move inventory off the books, they fired me and blacklisted me. I took the maintenance job under a fake resume to watch them." I stared at him. "You have been waiting for this. I have been waiting for someone brave enough to light the fuse," Caleb corrected. "But you need to know what comes next. Tyler has a slush fund. He has retained a crisis management firm that specializes in burying women like you. They will delay the hearing. They will file motion after motion until you run out of money and energy. They want you to starve." "I do not have time to starve," I said, thinking of my mother. "I need to end this fast." "Then do not fight them in the dark," Caleb said. "Fight them in the sun." I went into the motel room and opened my laptop. I did not write a sob story. I did not write an angry rant about my cheating husband. I wrote a single page. It was a timeline. Date, time, incident, evidence attached. I attached the video of the loading dock. I attached the audio of the call. I attached the email regarding the insurance fraud. I stripped away all the emotion and left only the cold, hard bones of their crime. "Are you sure?" Caleb asked, watching me hover over the send button. "Once this goes to the local news and the federal tip line, there is no going back. You might go to jail for the data breach. My mother runs out of medicine in 48 hours, I said. "If I am going down. I am taking the whole building with me." I hit send. The office of the legal aid attorney smelled of stale coffee and desperation, but to me, it smelled like a fighting chance. Sarah, my court-appointed lawyer, was young and overworked, but she had eyes that missed nothing. I laid everything out on her scarred wooden desk. My primary goal was not revenge, not yet. It was survival. I needed to block Tyler's emergency motion for guardianship over my mother. "If he gets power of attorney," Sarah said, tapping a pen against her chin. He will cut the funding for the care facility within 24 hours. He will argue it is fiscal responsibility during a divorce. He will not get the chance, I replied, my voice flat. Look at what Juno sent over. I slid the tablet across the desk. Juno had risked her career to pull the transaction logs. They showed a series of monthly payments labeled consulting fees totaling $12,000 a month going to a company called M Global Solutions. Who owns M Global? Sarah asked. Marissa May Patterson, I said. The head of HR. She was paying herself out of the vendor budget to approve Tyler's fake invoices. Sarah smiled. A sharp, dangerous expression. That is grand larceny and conspiracy, but we need to link it to the night of the party. That was where Caleb came in. He met us at the library an hour later, looking exhausted but triumphant. He did not hack the city surveillance system. He had gone the long way around, filing an emergency request for footage through a contact at the Department of Transportation, claiming a hit and run on his truck. I got the public lot feed, Caleb said, plugging a drive into my laptop. Watch the timestamp. 2 a.m, here comes the North Line van. We watched as the white van exited the private depot and pulled into a dark corner of the public lot. Tyler got out. He met a man in a sedan, a fence, likely, and handed over 2 crates. That connects the theft to the timeline, Caleb said. But you need to see the contract he filed with the court. I opened the document Tyler had submitted to freeze my assets. It was a post-nuptial agreement he claimed I had signed 6 months ago, waiving my rights to our shared accounts. I stared at the signature. It was perfect, too perfect. It is a forgery, I whispered. It is a lazy forgery. Caleb corrected me. I ran the metadata. He took a high-resolution scan of your signature from the mortgage deed we found on the public record and pasted it here. He did not even flatten the layers in the PDF. If we show this to a judge, he goes to prison for fraud on the court. Then I found the final nail. I was digging through an old archived folder in my personal cloud, looking for tax returns, when I found an email from Tyler dated 4 months ago. It was titled Project Stage. He must have CC'd me by mistake instead of Brielle, realized it, and deleted it from his sent folder, but he forgot it had already landed in my archive. It was a checklist. Item 1. Ensure Elena is sleep-deprived. Item 2. Instruct lighting team to use harsh wash on center stage. Item 3. Plant rumor with accounting about mental instability. I felt bile rise in my throat. He had engineered every second of my pain. We should release this online, Caleb said, his fists clenched. Destroy him before the hearing. No, I said. Closing the laptop. If we post it now, he claims it is faked. He spins the story. We wait. We let him walk into the courtroom thinking he has won. We let him lie under oath. And then we bury him. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I worked freelance copywriting jobs on a borrowed laptop, writing descriptions for garden hoses and pet food for 5 cents a word, just to scrape together enough cash for my mother's daily medication. I ate instant noodles and drank tap water, but I paid for the pills. I would not let him starve us out. On the night before the hearing, I sat by my mother's bed. She was weak, her speech slurred from the stroke, but her grip on my hand was iron. Elena, she whispered, her eyes searching mine. Do not become them. Win, but win clean. I kissed her forehead. I promise, Mom. I walked out of that room with a cold clarity. Tyler wanted a dirty fight. He wanted a screaming match where he could call me crazy. I was not going to give him that. I was going to walk into that courtroom with clean hands and a mountain of evidence. And I was going to shut the door on him forever. The mediation room was suffocatingly small, smelling of lemon polish and fear. Tyler sat on one side, flanked by a lawyer who cost $600 an hour. Marissa sat next to him, looking like she had swallowed a lemon. But the real surprise was Brielle. She did not sit next to Tyler. She sat at the far end of the table, and for the first time, She had her own legal counsel. "We are here to discuss a settlement," the mediator said, opening a file. "Mr. Rourke is offering 3 months of spousal support in exchange for a full non-disclosure agreement regarding company operations." I did not even blink. "No!" Tyler leaned forward, his eyes bloodshot. "Elena, take the money. You have nothing, actually." Brielle's lawyer interrupted, smoothing his tie. "My client has something to add to the record." Tyler looked at his mistress, confused. "Brielle, what are you doing?" Brielle refused to look at him. She stared at her hands, which were twisting a diamond ring, the one Tyler had bought with our savings. "I was not just dating him," Brielle said, her voice shaking. "Marissa hired me 6 months ago. She told me Tyler was a security risk. She wanted me to get close to him, record his calls, and gather leverage so she could push him out of the department. I was the bait." Tyler's face went white. He whipped his head toward Marissa. "You set me up. You sent her to my bed to audit me." Marissa slammed her hand on the table. "You were getting sloppy." "Tyler, you were spending cash too fast. I needed insurance. But then—" Brielle continued, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Then Tyler told me about the big project. He promised me 50% of the shares if I helped him get rid of Elena. He said we would be rich." The room was silent. The triangle of betrayal was complete. Marissa had used Brielle to trap Tyler. Tyler had used Brielle to destroy me, and Brielle had played them both, only to get caught in the middle. I leaned forward, locking eyes with the crying girl. "Brielle," I said softly, "do you know where that bonus fund comes from?" "It is from the event sponsors," Brielle stammered. "For the private storage units?" "No," I said. "Look at the invoice numbers. They do not match any vendor in the state. That money is for moving uninspected cargo across state lines. It is not sponsorship. It is smuggling." Brielle stopped crying. She looked at her lawyer, then at Tyler. The color drained from her face as the reality hit her. She was not just a mistress or a corporate spy. She was an accessory to a federal crime. "You said it was legal," Brielle screamed at Tyler. "You said it was just creative accounting." "She is lying," Tyler shouted, pointing at me. "Marissa signed off on everything. It was her idea. Do not pin this on me." Marissa shrieked, standing up. "I only handled the payroll. You organized the trucks." They were tearing each other apart. The alliance had dissolved into a pool of panic and blame. Caleb, standing quietly by the door, walked over and slid a single sheet of paper in front of me. It was a photocopy of an internal document from 2 years ago. "Look at the signature," Caleb whispered. It was a whistleblower complaint filed by a former warehouse manager about suspicious night shipments. At the bottom, under the stamp case closed, "Insufficient evidence," was Tyler's signature. I felt a chill go down my spine. This was not new. Tyler had been covering this up for years. And then I realized the true horror of his plan. He did not cheat on me because he was bored. He did not humiliate me on stage because he was cruel. He did it because I was the communications director. I was the one person who would eventually see the audit reports. He had to destroy my credibility. He had to make me look insane so that if I ever found out, no one would believe me. "He did not want a divorce," I said to the room, my voice trembling with rage. "He wanted to neutralize a witness." Tyler stopped shouting. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He knew I had figured it out. "We are done here," I said, standing up and gathering my files. "Save your arguments for the judge. And Brielle, get a better lawyer. You are going to need one." I walked out of the mediation room. I did not feel triumph yet. I felt the cold, hard weight of duty. I was going to the hearing tomorrow not just to save myself, but to burn their entire corrupt kingdom to the ground. The courtroom air was stale and recycled, but Tyler looked as fresh as a man who had just returned from a spa vacation. He leaned back in his chair, checking his watch, clearly annoyed that he had to spend 45 minutes finalizing the destruction of his wife. He offered me a pitying smile across the aisle, the kind you give to a child who has dropped their ice cream. He thought I was broken. He thought I was there to beg for alimony. He was wrong. Your Honor, my lawyer, Sarah, said, standing up, "We are not here to contest the divorce. We are here to submit evidence of a criminal conspiracy to defraud this court and the Northline Ledger Group." Tyler laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of amusement. Your Honor, this is just another delusion. My wife is unwell. The only thing unwell. Mr. Rourke, I said, standing up before the judge could silence me, is your cybersecurity. Sarah handed the bailiff a thick binder. It contained the chain of evidence. We had the transaction logs Juno had stolen, showing the $12,000 a month flowing into Marissa's shell company. We had the surveillance footage Caleb had legally subpoenaed, showing the Northline van moving unlogged cargo at 2 a.m. We had the digital forensics report proving that my signature on the post-nuptial agreement was a clumsy cut-and-paste job from a mortgage deed. Tyler stopped smiling. And finally, I said, holding up a flash drive, I would like to submit Exhibit D. This is footage from the internal audio-visual system of the venue where the company party was held. It captures the sound check 2 hours before the event. The judge nodded. The video played on the courtroom monitors. It showed Tyler standing on the stage, pointing at the floor. Put the mark right here. Tyler's voice rang out from the speakers, clear and commanding. When she steps on the X, cut the lights and run the blooper reel. I want her humiliated. If she does not cry, we do not get the mental health clause. The courtroom went dead silent. Tyler stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Objection, his lawyer shouted, standing up. This was obtained illegally. Actually, a deep voice interrupted from the back of the room. The doors opened, and the federal investigator Caleb had contacted walked in. He was holding a briefcase. We obtained that footage with a warrant this morning, Your Honor. Along with the shipping manifests, Mr. Rourke tried to delete. Tyler looked at the investigator, then at me. His arrogance shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The proceedings shifted instantly from a civil dispute to a criminal inquiry. The judge reviewed the investigator's preliminary report. The order came down fast. Tyler was not leaving via the front door. He was detained immediately for fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice. As the bailiff moved to handcuff him, Tyler looked at me one last time. There was no love left, only the terrified realization that he had underestimated the woman he slept next to for 6 years. Marissa was indicted the same afternoon. Brielle, realizing she was the disposable pawn in a game of kings and queens, turned state's witness. She avoided jail time, but her reputation was incinerated. She walked away with her freedom and a permanent record that would ensure she never worked in a corporate office again. It was the most expensive lesson of her life. The court vacated the protective order against me and unfroze my assets. The judge ordered a full forensic accounting of our marital property to ensure Tyler could not hide a single dime. The fallout at Northline Ledger Group was nuclear. The CEO was forced to issue a public apology to the entire staff. He announced the immediate release of all back pay and the establishment of an emergency fund for employees with medical hardships. I received a check for 6 months of back wages, plus a settlement for wrongful termination. It was enough to pay for my mother's rehabilitation in full. 3 months later, I stood on the sidewalk in front of a small brick building downtown. The smell of fresh paint drifted out the open door. I had used the settlement money to start my own boutique agency, one dedicated to ethical crisis management. I looked up at the sign I had just hung in the window. Truth doesn't need a stage, but I'll use one if I have to. I walked inside. I was not the same woman who had stood on that stage, shaking in a silver dress. I had walked through the fire and burned off everything that was weak. I stepped onto the floor of my new office. Not to be laughed at, but to get to work. I had taken back my name, my honor, and my freedom. And that was a victory sweeter than any revenge. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment down below and share your thoughts on Tyler's karma. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.